Hey, good morning. This is David, Crossties Beagles. I doing this little segment on uh, integrity among houndsmen, and I thought I'd give you a third installment this morning. What I want to talk to you about this morning is integrity in regards to hounds again, and specifically, I want to talk to you about aging derbies and my thoughts on that. If you've been in hounds very long in beagles, then you know that there's a pretty common practice among guys that field trial of not putting the correct age on the derbies. And so if you're not familiar with that, there's a cutoff age on our birth date that carries your derbies into the next year. So say for instance you had a derby that was going to be born in early June, and the cutoff date was July the 1st. A lot of guys will bump those pups up and show their birthdays after that cutoff date, because what that does is that gives them the advantage of having a dog that's almost a full year older to run when the derby trial runs around for that year. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Several years ago, I had an opportunity that a guy who was from a pretty big name kennel. If I called him, you guys would all know him, but won't do that. Purpose isn't to smear anybody's name, but it's just to share with you what my feelings on that practice. First thing that I would say is it's just wrong. It's just lying. That's what it is, and I just call it what it is. But the other thing that really bothers me is that it creates a disadvantage and an unfair advantage, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But I had got word about this a guy having a good young derby that was for sale. Had a good background as far as pedigree and all, and it was in line with some of the stuff that I breed. It was a dog that went back to some buckshot stuff, and was a lot of Otis in the pedigree, and just some of that good old blood that a lot of guys like and run. So I contacted the guy, and he said, yeah, that he was going to sell her, that she was a real nice young derby prospect, but she wasn't as strong as what he ran. And so did some checking around, did some asking around about the cross. Some of the guys that were hunting some of the stuff that came out of that cross said it was pretty nice stuff, had some good hunts. So I went on, called him. It was a situation where I couldn't get down there to see it run, but I wanted to buy it because of the bloodline in it. So I went on and worked it out with a guy to go down and pick the dog up. I actually got my dad to run down. He and I ran up and picked it up. And when I got over there, we exchanged the money. The hound was a good-looking hound. You could tell she'd been well taken care of, and so I bought her on site. As I bought her as an 8-month-old pup that was well started and looking good. So I bought the pup, brought her back home. Found out after the fact that this was not a 8-month-old pup. This actually ended up getting this after the transaction was made from that breeder that I bought her from. I found out this wasn't an 8-month-old pup, that what I actually had gotten was a 14-month-old or a year and 2-month pup. And so I was pretty upset about that for a couple of reasons. One is I had been lied to, and I put down good money for a pup. The other reason was, and what really bothered me about this was that if I look at a pup that I would call a good prospect at 8 months old, we all know that the more running time you put in on these pups, the better that they get. And we expect that when you buy a pup that's 8 months old, it's going to be started. It most likely it's going to be a green started to a lightly started dog. And so part of the problem I had was for a 8-month-old pup, she looked pretty good. But when I found out that she was 14-month-old and I started putting some running time in her, what I saw was that for a 14-month-old, she was not very good at all. In fact, she was maybe average. And so I put some running time in the dog. Uh, there was a gentleman that had been calling me, was looking for a young dog. Told him the situation on her, and I told him that she wasn't gonna make the cut at our kennel. She just wasn't strong enough, and so the guy said that he wanted her. He went on and bought her. Ran her for probably about 6 months to a year. She didn't improve at all. She had pretty much topped out in what she was doing. And I watched that dog as she's been traded and sold several times over the last 2 or 3 years. And still to this day, she's just maybe an average dog at best. And she's being bred for her paperwork on the puppies, and not really thrown anything of any caliber or quality at all in her puppies. So that's a bad thing on that end. The other thing is, the Derby trials are created to assess those young hounds and their capabilities. And one of the good things about a Derby trial is it helps us to see the rate of maturity that certain bloodlines and certain crosses are making. So when we look at that and we say, well, such and such dog won such and such Derby, or such and such dog placed in the Derby runoff on this year, we expect that what we're looking at is a dog that is at the very oldest 2 years old, just turned 2 years old. But what's happening a lot is that a lot of these dogs that are being ran in Derbies at the time of the Derby runoff are almost 3 years old. Some of them are 3 years old. And so that's a problem that I see in the beagle world, in the dog world in general, is that it's skewing the assessment. And so what you're seeing as a result of that, again, I'm not a trialer, but I am a beagler that's been around this for quite a long while, and I'm a breeder that's been dealing with and breeding scent hounds for decades. And what we're seeing is a lot of these dogs are coming out of their Derby year and they're not getting any better. And so you put them into a situation where they're running with all age dogs, whether it be in the field or whether it be in a field trial, and they're not able to excel, and you don't see them finishing out for their field champion titles a lot of times after that. So that's a big thing. And again, I've seen this several times. Somebody might say, well, it's not really a big deal if you fudge out a month or 2 months on a puppy to get it into the next year. But that common practice has been pushed, and it's been pushed, and it's been pushed, kind of like the abortion issue in politics right now. They started out with something that people were looking at and they were saying, quote unquote, it's not that bad. Now we've got full-term abortions right up until the time that baby is delivered. And that's kind of not the same thing, but it's kind of the same principle that's going on with aging these Derbies. So just like I say, guys, be careful about that. Find you a reputable breeder, whoever it is that you can trust. Ask questions about it, because you do not want to get stuck buying what you believe is a started dog that's already a year and a half old, that's kind of topped out already, and it's not gonna continue to improve into a good dog that you can be proud of. God bless you. Hope you have a good day, and happy hunting.